Okay. My name is Dr. Janaki Flint. I actually work here in the Counseling Center as the Assistant Director of Outreach and Prevention Services. And I'm also acting as the Interim Director for the next few days because we have a new one coming. Hallelujah. And and I also teach Intro to African American Psychology here at Tulane.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Thad Tatum. I'm a formerly incarcerated individual who served more than 28 and a half years in Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. I come out here and I went to school. I enrolled in Southern University at New Orleans, where I received a degree in addictive behavior counseling and psychiatry. And from there, I formed my own group, formerly incarcerated peer support group, where it gives guys an opportunity to have a platform to discuss some of the things and challenges that they may be facing out here. I'm looking forward to the panel meeting, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having us and for organizing this panel, Diana and Ryan and Jinaki, for orienting us today in our bodies. So my name is Claudia Chavez. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Anthropology here at Tulane.
Good morning. Appreciate everyone being here. My name's Jared Wall. Along with that, I'm also formerly incarcerated. I served 26 years in the Midwest. I was very fortunate to kind of be at the end of a golden era, received a lot of higher education while I was in, and had the opportunity to actually administrate or run the college program in a maximum security facility as a prisoner for 13 years. Higher education in prison is what I work with now. It's what I do. I'm also a fourth-year PhD student here at Tulane.
Yes, I apologize because I did want to pull in Deanna and Ryan, and also thank you for this great honor to be able to speak today. So thank you, Claudia, for reminding us of that. And thank all of you for being here to listen. One of the title of this is Resisting the Simulacra, Conversations and Rituals for Finding Identity and Authenticity in Community Engagement. Is a lot. So our question today is, how are you resisting the simulacra or the colonized spaces where you work and live, using the concepts of healing and embodiment?
Well, let me see if I can answer that. What we do as an organization, it coincides with everything that Janika has spoke about and what this panel, is about today. We look for healing every day, especially from the places that we come from. Coming from a place such as a prison setting, and after spending X amount of years there, I know guys that spent 30, 40, 50 years, incarcerated, and comes back out here, not being able to identify with how to heal. And this is one of the most important things that I think someone has to make a change. When they're making the change, is being able to know how to heal. We, as African American males, we tend to put a lot of things on our shoulders, but we just hide. We hide our hurt. We hide our pain. We absorb things in a way in which we are built to do these things, which is not necessarily true. No human being should be burdened with the things that people go through, where it's a crisis and the mishaps of life happen to come down on you, where you're enforced into involuntary slavery, involuntary servitude. This is what happened in prison. And after serving so many years, you come out here, you try to fit back in. You try to acknowledge the fact that you're different. You're different. You're not the same person. You're not part of the community, because nobody understands exactly what you're going through, which brings more trauma. within inside your, your being, your circle. So you try to learn how to heal. You try to learn how to forgive. You try to learn how to, to adapt, so to speak. And in doing so, it's a very brand new experience to many people, especially myself. It's a brand new experience to being able to learn how to heal, to learn how to forgive, to learn how to be able to accept that, I am different. So I learned that it's okay to be different. In doing so, it helps my healing. It helps me to heal better. So I expecting now, looking forward to going through this topic more, and I'll just pass it on.
You want to piggyback on this?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Thad. It's interesting what you're saying there, Thad, about the healing, and I think one of the worst things is isolation. So when you get out, so I was basically stuck in the Midwest. I was returned after 26 years to where I grew up, where the crime was, which is a very small town, so it ended up being a 1989 large crime in a small town, but yet I'm coming back because this is where my family is, right? I was fortunate my grandfather's still alive. He's like 98, but at the same time, I'm alone, Yeah, even your family that loves you and understands you doesn't quite, get it. They're trying. I mean, it's adjustment for them to reintegrate you in their lives now too. But the jump from that, then, I think the importance of community, particularly what like Thad has started here with the formerly incarcerated peer support group. I served 26 years and I'm in the middle. Okay, there's the amount of time that's been served. But yet I come to this group, and every time you talk about embodiment, I feel like I can just sit there and my whole body goes through a sigh. I'm comfortable. I don't have to go through a half hour's worth of explanation just to explain a punchline or a half hour's explanation to explain an experience, because they get it. Different state, different culture of prison, but it's similar shared experience that we have. We have like Tuesday night, we had our meeting was culture shock for like when we're all coming out. And it's so nice to hear. It's like, yeah, well, I experienced this and this and this. And the other one's like, yeah, me too. Well, I don't feel like the oddball, the person who's just experiencing this, right? Because he does this, okay, this is across the board. This is part of the effects of long-term institutionalization, and us reentering. And, it's so nice to have that shared experience. And then that builds, instead of stigma, now we have solidarity. Instead of stigma, now we have understanding. Instead of isolation, now we have community. And, that difference that makes is so important. And the last point I just want to say, I guess a lot of what we are doing, we feel like with this group, is we are trying to remedy, we're dealing with the after effects of the era of mass incarceration. We're dealing with the lingering effects of people from that era. A lot of us are getting out now. I had a 60-year sentence at 17 years old. A lot of the guys that are coming out from Angola had life sentences they beat, and they're out now, still on lifetime parole. But we feel like from that era, what was happened, within the society, we are the ones now dealing with that as individuals, but in community, that's what we are trying to address.
So I'm gonna share a very different story. It's interesting how we came together. We didn't know each other. It was Diana that put us together. So today we were thinking about sharing different experiences, like putting our experiences out there and seeing what conjures, what happens, what magic happens when we share where we come from and when we hear about the simulacra. So in my case, I'm from Mexico City. I was trained there. I studied law over there. I was very interested, and I'm very interested in indigenous rights. Soon I noticed that law was not gonna give me the tools to do the kind of work I wanted. So I decided to study anthropology. I say this because in my case, I think that I've been studied to return to myself and who I am, interestingly enough. I think that law school did a brainwash on me, and I see all lawyers, how they are trained to think different about the world. Anthropology did the same. It was also a schooling, teaching me a very different way of seeing. And you might have, I'm curious to know who's from academia, who's related to academia here. Thank you. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. I was told you need to fake it till you make it. Yeah, I was told that because I was like, I don't know, I came to the US to study my PhD. I felt I didn't fit in. The anthropology that I studied in Mexico was completely different from the one that was being taught here. So I was like, okay, it seems that what I know, it's not useful anymore. So I need to begin from zero. And you begin to believe this, right? I found healing through community-based research. I was trained in this track that existed one day in the University of Texas at Austin that was called activist anthropology. It's a way of calling it. You can also call it politically engaged research. And there, in community, I learned that it didn't matter the faking, the image that I was trying to present to fit. People wanted to know who I was. So there was a very particular way of doing this research. I work with indigenous people in Mexico, survivors of a massacre. Maybe you have heard about the beautiful state of Chiapas in southeast Mexico and the Zapatista uprising. Well, I work with Las Abejas, who is our organization that is very close to the Zapatistas, and they were attacked precisely for being struggling for indigenous autonomy. So in this process of wanting to work together, because I've been hearing other panels where many of the activists say, wait, we don't go there and try to do the collaboration. We wait for people to come to us. In academia, it's very different because there are many of us. So people usually, it's very difficult that people come to you to say, okay, let's do this. In my case, I showed up and I was in the field for so long until the collaboration emerged. The point of collaborative research is that you don't plan the objectives of the research in your office, in your desk. You go there, you meet the people, you begin to have conversations and begin to detect common problems, things that the community wants you to address. So the point is to put your knowledge and your skills to the service of a group of people. In this case was an organization. And in this case, they have been struggling for justice for so many years. They went through the whole judicial system, and of course, the state was not gonna punish itself. This was a state-sponsored massacre, right? So the collaboration happened when the organization was in the Inter-American system, trying to get justice over there, and they needed more evidence to prove that the massacre didn't happen one day, but has continued occurring for almost 25 years. They wanted to document the effects of the massacre. So this fabulous opportunity to work with the healers of the community, the elders, the survivors, the leaders, with doctors, with psychologists, anthropologists, sociologists, activists. It was a collaboration between very different kind of people in order to recollect the stories. It was not probing into the event of the massacre, but who are you today? What has this event done to your life, and how do you give meaning in the present? So it was not about going, and there were too many testimonies about the massacre. We didn't want to go there. We wanted to document the present day and how, since justice hasn't been achieved, how the paramilitaries have begun to reactivate violence, and what does that imply for the communities? So there's a concept, I will pass the microphone, that really touched me. One was, I was telling you, people wanted to know who I was. And in that, they asked me to trace, like, where did I come from and where I was going in order to understand who I was. Very different way of presenting yourself, right? Maya communities require me to do this. And the other thing that really moved me and has been revolutionary for me has been the concept of sentir pensar, to feel and think with the heart. And through this collaborative research, what we did is that, to sit down together, including our bodies. It was not only this part, it was the emotional aspect of violence. How can we remember and be present through these emotions? And how can research can be a ceremony, as Native American scholar Sean Wilson says. It's a process of putting the pieces back together in order to heal. So I wanted to offer this idea of sentir pensar as a way of co-creating knowledge together, a knowledge that is not only from here, but it's about remembering who we are. What are we bringing in our bodies from our ancestors? And what happens when we put this knowledge in connection to each other? We are creating something different and so powerful. So I wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So many nuggets in all of this. And ancestors, I think, is critical to bring here, because when we think about who we are bringing into community, is who else are we bringing with us? And who are we meeting? Because you're also meeting other people's ancestors. You're bringing yours, they're bringing theirs. And even if you don't even believe in a concept of ancestors, it doesn't mean that you don't walk on the shoulders of other people, right? So even if your mama is your ancestor, right? She birthed you. Even if you have no relationship with her, you have ancestors. I do a lot of ancestral work, and I get a lot of shame from people who are adopted. And they say, well, what if I don't know my parents? I was adopted. Like, they can't honor their ancestry. And I was like, but someone brought you here, right? And you have the ancestors of those who put the energy into raising you, right? So for me, I think answering that question has been throughout my life. I grew up here in New Orleans. My father was pretty popular here. He was a DJ. He owned a chain of music stores. He had a dance TV show. So he was like that guy, right? So a lot of people knew him. Anybody who's over 50 that lives in New Orleans knew my dad. They were like, oh, that's your daddy. But one of the reasons why he started that dance show was because he saw a lot of young black men getting arrested just for hanging out on the street. And so he wanted to provide them with something to do. And then that became all kids, right? So children after school went to Channel 26 studios and started dancing. And that ended up being like a little mini Soul Train, right? And so which he ran for many years. And so I had a bird's eye view of community work, right? My dad, he knew James Brown. He was good friends with all the greats, right? But operating in community, he always understood it. Don't get me wrong. Like, he had his thing. But he also understood that other people who looked like him needed to survive in some way, needed to thrive. And he was always looking for ways to do that. My mom was also community-based too. So I've been kind of walking around the street helping people get elected since I was about 7. So, but with that, doing that, I feel like over the course of my life, it has just shown up. Like, I cannot say that I have tried to do any one thing. It has just shown up. Wherever I show up, I'm like, okay, where's the community? What we doing? What they doing? And there's communities that I don't want to be a part of. I don't feel like that maybe I'm not feeling it, like with my Sixth Sense or that I don't belong in, right? Because I could potentially be harmful to that community. So that's also something we have to think about. You don't have to go everywhere. Talk to your ego first. You don't have to be there. And I always say, if you're going into a community saying how much you're helping the people, don't do that. Well, maybe you need to examine it, right? Or at least examine it, right? Because really, how are those people helping you? How are the people helping you that you're meeting? How are those people reflecting your body in a way that is not fake? And how do we know it, right? So my thing, being a trauma specialist, is I'm always thinking about things from the inner mechanics of the body. And so I know, and I'm trained to look at posture and things like that. So it can be a little bit daunting when you meet people because you're like, stop doing that. Stop analyzing people. Like, stop looking. But it is hard when you're trying. And I'm looking at myself, too, because I'm like, okay, I know I don't want to have that. I want to have an open posture, right, when I'm talking to people. I want people to see that I'm interested in what they have to say to me. And I'm taking it in as, how does it feed my body? And how am I reflecting it back, right? Yeah. That's really important. So for me, resisting the simulacra, and it has served me very well, I can say. I have been able to be included in communities that I didn't think I would have been included in, just from, as Claudia said, just from being me. People just want you to show up as you. They don't care about this other stuff. How can we build together? How can we get this done? How do we show up for each other and walk to a path where we can feel things are real? And for me, being in the body is where that all begins. If we don't have a sense of ourselves in this body, if we're not embodied, then how do we know where we're going and if that is real? But we're trained by society through two major phenomena: religion and media. I spent 17 years in advertising before I took on psychology as my other career, second career. And before that, I was in the music business. So let me tell you, lots of fakery. Lots of simulacra going on in those spaces. Loads of it. And I've seen what it does to a body firsthand. And I mean mind, body, spirit, soul. Because that's the body. The body is not separate from the mind. It's not separate from the spirit. It's not separate from the soul. It's all one body. We don't have a thing where we're like, oh, we're just so mentally, whatever you are mentally, you are physically. It's all one body. And so the body does this thing called, any neuroscientists in here? Come on now, help me. Okay, well, I'm gonna help you. So I know I'm wild. But the body does this thing as it's moving through the universe, through the world, called neuroception. And that is, you don't even know it's happening, honestly. The body's just naturally looking for safety and danger cues in its environment. It comes from that backside of your brain, the reptilian brain, they call it. It's the first kind of one that was evolved from way, way, way back. So you are just naturally looking, right? So you see your friend, you like her, she's great. You're like, oh, you just move to her. You don't stop and think, I'm going to move towards her now, right? That doesn't happen. You just automatically go. So these are like these automatic, involuntary movements, right? And then you walk further, you hug her, whatever, y'all moving on. You see somebody who looks kind of daunting and they have like a pit bull that looks like you might be lunch. And then your body's naturally going to recoil. It's going to say, oh, avoid that. I don't want to get eaten. That's the body protecting you. You don't even, it just happens just like that. So when we are meeting and interacting with other people in spaces, that's what happens. You are not even aware of it. So you may meet somebody who may actually trigger something for you, and you may say, oh, I don't like that person. When you feel that, notice what's happening inside of here. Not something's wrong with them because I don't like them, right? But we do it. All of us are guilty. Come on now, we're human beings. So, and we've been taught to engage each other based on an ideal that has been created for us, right? So we see these ideals, we have these images of here's what I want to look like. So we get taught if you just grind enough, you're gonna be successful. And this grind is gonna get you all this money and you're gonna do all these things and you will be lauded as the person who has succeeded. By what standard? Who created the standard for success? If we're not asking each other that, we're playing along, right? Who created that standard? Where did that begin? Because I can tell you in other communities and societies, there are many across the globe that they don't see the grind as a success, right? I just bought this book called, from my sister Trish Hershey out of Atlanta, woo woo, called the Nap Ministry. Yeah. Rest is resistance, Honte. Okay, right. Yes, give it up for Trish Hershey. So yes, and so we live in the world of the great reveal, right? So the reveal now is people are coming forth and they're pushing back on this simulacra. They're saying, no, we have to rest these sacred divine bodies. That is the success. Not driving them into the ground where we're depressed and we're anxious and we're dealing with all this stuff because we have shot for an ideal that has been prepared for us and laid out for us and we have eaten it. So spit it out, vomit it. That's all I'm gonna say on that. Okay. Let's see where we are. All right. So now we get to ask each other questions. So who wants to go? Because I just. Okay. All right. Look at Stan. Well, okay. So I would like to ask, how do you find spaces to really tap into your bodies? One of the things that I really appreciated about doing this work with all three of these folks is I think they all show in real time what a transformation of trauma into benevolent activism looks like, and being able to be in community looks like. Thad talks a lot about post-incarceration syndrome. And if you know anything about the trauma that could pursue being incarcerated, that is a lot of like sensory deprivation and coming back and really putting out, like helping people to really get reacclimated to their environment. That's a lot of body work, right? But yet he and Jared have given so much and brought a community together around that. That is transformation. That is transformative. And it's transcending, right, what we believe should be true about folks who are incarcerated. So I'd like to hear more about that. That would be my question, is how do you feel that transformation happened for you?
Well, I listened to a lot about transforming your problems into everyday life. And it was funny, I was listening to my panel member when she's saying about faking it to make it. I think formerly incarcerated mayors do that too much. They fake it to make it. They come out here and they try to be accepted. They don't know how to fit into a community or an environment, whereas they be functionable without being judged. So they act like they all right. They fake like they can do these things. They fake like they are part of the community which don't accept them. So how do you transform your body from a place where you've been, an actual slave into somewhere where you come out here and you want to be accepted on the same level and the basis of everyone else? How do you do that? For people who's not trained to understand their embodiment of healing, for people who act a certain way to be able to adapt to certain things, we have a thing whereas we can hide so much, we can hide behind so much where we don't have to be able to express who we really are, if that makes any sense. See, out here, we can't do the things that was residual that we brought back from prison. But those things help us survive for almost 20, 30, 40 years. So if we do it out here, we're going to be looking at as crazy. If you notice that I feel more comfortable looking at you guys than to be sitting in the audience amongst you guys, because my back is to the wall. I ain't got to worry about nobody behind me. I ain't got to worry about so many different things. And why I'm so conscious of this? Because this is a protective method all my life. I spent more than half of my life in prison. So it's certain things that you had to adapt to, certain things that you had to do for survival motives only, just to survive every day. The lights, it's y'all take for granted. If I came up in this room and no lights wasn't on, it was cool with me, because my senses gonna allow my sight to adapt to all that's around me. Because I've been in so many dark places where I had to see with my ears. And I had to understand that my senses is what helped me to survive. I got to listen with my eyes. Meaning that I got to be able to understand what you're saying without you saying anything, from your body language, and and to be able to recognize that your posture, as Janika spoke of, tells me a lot. It tells me where you accept me. It tells me where you rejected me or whatever. But I learned these things and wasn't taught these things. I learned this on-the-job training, because it was a survival method that I had to use, being in the bloodiest penitentiary in the nation, where all we seen was murders and rapes and demaining and all these other things. And so I had to, when I went to prison, I was 21 years old. I thought I was adult. I thought I was a man. I thought these certain things that I had grown up to believe was what I was, only to find out I wasn't. I only found out I was human when I got to prison, because I was around so much dehumanization. I knew this couldn't be what we call God wanted for me, where people throwing human waste on each other like animals, where people getting burnt up in a cell like animals. So when I escaped that, in the mind I'm speaking of, when I was able to escape that and come back out here and to see certain things, I too become emotional. I too become, to the point of, what is healing? Where do I begin at? Where do I go for that solace, that solitude, where I knew when I was in prison, I got a certain place I can go if I just want to be totally to myself, called isolation confinement. I learned so much in isolation confinement. This is where I learned about my senses. This is because I'm alone. I'm by myself. I'm in the cell 23 hours a day, alone. So a lot of things happen. A lot of things happen. Whereas your senses take control of you. And it was such a surreal thing to learn when I got out here what was guiding me, because I didn't know. I just was moving along. I didn't know nothing about sensory. I didn't know nothing about all the things that I learned since I've been home. You know, I finished high school before I went to prison, only to find out I had a 7th grade education. It wasn't until I got in prison that I was able to educate myself, because of what the school system gave me in the African American community didn't prepare me for what we call the real world. So every day of my life, I've been doing this, grabbing that, in the dark, so to speak, trying to find a sense of balance, or something that I can hold on to, not recognizing that all this comes from the embodiment of one. Everything that you endure, everything that you see, everything that you hear. It's like I didn't believe that I can hear a blade of grass until I was taught this, that you can actually go out in the morning time and the grass would talk to you. The earth itself would talk to you. I didn't believe that. So when I come to a forum like this here, it's exciting for me to be amongst people who one day didn't accept me, who one day, who at one time judged me just from this. I was telling the panel how I felt when I rose to the campus today. This same campus, Tulane, is a place where I grew up around, running around, going to Tulane in the Saints game when they was playing at Tulane Stadium, going around here, stealing out Newton cafeteria, right? They had good food. I used to come there and, get the food, and you had to pay till you left, so we ain't had no money anyway, so we just snuck out. But to come back to this, it's like a 360. From all that I had been through in life, and then to come back, those senses started kicking in. So when I turned off to Broadway to Willow, all the senses started kicking in. Because I'm 61 years old. I've been around this area for more than 50 years. But if I'd have still been locked up, I'd have been locked up at today for 38 and a half years. So all that intertwining, all the things that I do today, everything that I do today, the stage was set for me to do this long ago.
Appreciate that, Thad. It's just interesting with the embodiment. I mean, having done long-term incarceration, it's a mixed bag. So I come out. I feel like talking about ancestry. I embody not only my parents. I had a good upbringing. I was fortunate with good parents, grandparents. I mean, we'd be out in the country, 3 generations of us baling hay together, working together. That was kind of how I grew up. But there's also part of my ancestry I don't hold on to. I don't agree with. Okay. It's a very homogenous area where I came from. They love Trump. What can I say? It's the Midwest, So it's interesting that part of that is my ancestry, and I love what I got from them, but I don't agree. I don't, not all that is my ancestry. I look at the ancestry, a lot of mine, honestly, is I was raised by lifers. I was raised by lifers inside, I remember the first one was a jailhouse lawyer. He looked at my case. He saw obvious red flags, and he's like the first person I ever talked to. He's like, hey, I've got a friend over in the psych department. She helped me. Why don't you go see her? He trusted her. I trusted him. So I went. And that got to be the beginning, really, of my journey of starting to change my life. And then, the old schoolers, they saw I was interested in education. And so I started going up to college because of them. They embodied something that I wanted. You know, I saw they were different than other cats. They were in the college department. They're talking about something completely different when we're at the chow hall table. So I went in there. Then, you know, I felt like they're the ones that brought me in. They started teaching me how to administrate and run the college program. You know, they invested in me. Then they ended up, you know, they taught me, you get, well, then you give back. You know, and that's what I did. And that's what I'm still doing with college education programs today. I feel like maybe inside of mine I've helped the most people I'll ever help in my life. But the realistic is I feel like out here, embodiment, ancestry, part of my embodiment is bringing them with me, I feel. If I would have been incarcerated 3 years later, in Indiana, they would have had the life without parole. And when prosecutors first got that, it was just like a new toy that they're using. I mean, people that were getting it that shouldn't have gotten it. I always ask, would have that been me? Would that been me? You know, because I have friends that had no worse crime than me or several other people, and they'll never get out, or I'm out. So some of us make it out, had this sense of survivor's guilt, you know. But yeah, I think that's one thing you have to kind of work through. But you just realize also that you're doing, you're bringing them with you, and you're doing, you know, what you can for other people in that situation. You know, college education in prison kept me sane. I feel like it was an avenue that became a lens through which I am observing, looking, and understanding. Not just a class I'm trying to memorize facts, but it's a lens. I'm looking at my past life. You know, I'm critiquing the present culture I was in of, you know, toxic masculinity, among other things. And then also, you know, it became how I was viewing my community I grew up in, how I wanted to view my future. You know, so coming out here, I feel like embodiment, I have a lot of good things I've brought with me from growing up in the penitentiary, without question. Lessons I learned, being able to read other people, understand situations that are getting ready to play out before they happen. You just learn this sixth sense that you live by and keeps you alive. The other part of that is you bring with you a lot of trauma, too. Okay? Or what was called in the joint, you know, just vigilance. You realize there's tension here, something's getting ready to jump off, so you walk this way, right? When you come out here, all of a sudden, that doesn't shut off. It's hardwired in you now. It's a different setting. Now you have hypervigilance now, you know. The day we met the other day, it's like you heard a noise, and it's like outside my window, 3:30 in the morning, couldn't go back to sleep, okay? So, you know, it's both, and I deal with that here. I deal with that, and that's something I'm working through, okay? I mean, it's just part of it. So, yeah, so ancestry, I feel like I embody not only who I grew up with, the people from prison that were my mentors, that I'm grateful for. And in turn, I feel like I mentored a lot of people over time, too. And I feel like they are in me. I carry them with me. Pass it on from here.
I think that we don't have time for anything else.
Well, we can cut that in, and you can go. No,
Okay.
you go.
So thank you for sharing these experiences. So I'm going to be brief. When I think about healing, I think about something that I was sharing with you guys the other day. How working with Las Abejas, they say that justice, in their long struggle for justice, they've realized that justice is a colonial temporality, as other scholars have said. And the limit of justice is the state. They realized that the kind of justice they were looking for, they are not going to attain it through the state. So they began building their own justice. They call it la otra justicia, the other justice. And it's an embodied form of justice. They say justice is not going to happen until my body feels calm and in peace. So yeah, that really opened my mind, and to realize that we take for granted that justice means one thing, and turns out that it can have so many meanings. If the perpetrators of the massacre are back in the community, they're not looking for punishment. Las Abejas are not looking for punishment. That is a Western way of seeing justice. It's not about putting a person in jail. It's about how to reestablish the bonds of the community and to, you know, enact pardon, enact compassion, and learning to live together again. So I think that it's something that, of course, sounds beautiful. It's not easy. That's why they are still struggling to make this happen. Yeah. And building their other way of thinking about justice and practicing through memory, embodiment, a lot of embodiment. It's about remembering their own stories and making them the relevant narrative of the massacre. Remembering, we constantly think that the only way to change things is by actually moving things. They really believe that perception, changing our perception of things, there is liberation. The narratives that they are creating, and this applies to all of us, can be this imagining of a different future, of another way of doing things. So the change, in the moment you begin to perceive things different and change the narrative about things, you are enacting change. So, and this has a lot to do, according to them, and what you guys have been explaining has a lot to do with embodiment.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for answering that question. Wow, a lot came out there. Yes, a lot of real talk from within the body. But yeah, you're right. When we are imagining America, we have to first challenge the simulacra that is called America, and go from that space and do the abolition work, right? I love when I first heard you talk about this in our earlier conversations about decolonizing justice. Like, what does that mean, right? It really challenges us to really question all the things that we think we know are true. And so in our bodies, we can do that. I know we don't have time for the final piece, but we'll just end it here because we kind of went over. So I'm looking at our boss over here. So we'll just leave you with that. Resist.